Welcome to the NTC Temporal 3 podcast all about fire alarm. Today we're joined by my co-host, Mr. Charles Ollner. Good morning, Charles.
Good morning. Hello, everyone.
And also our special guest, our recurring special guest, Mr. Edward T-Bone Hayden. Good morning, Ed.
Hey, nice to be with you guys. Thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time. Obviously, you're at a job site this morning. I see the sprinkler valve in the back there, sprinkler equipment in the back. Awesome.
Getting ready to do a commercial fire alarm system and sprinkler system test. Yes.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Well, the first thing I'd like to talk about today, guys, is how NTC instructors work to engage our students. So I want you guys to tell me something or answer something for me. Is the code boring?
If I may, is it boring? Well, let's really be honest about this. And reading the fire alarm code book is like it's about exciting as watching paint dry. But the real truth about this is inside that boring code book, there are rules that decide, whether systems are going to work or people die, if I can be so dramatic, right?
Sure.
So I think that that's kind of what makes the code a little less boring when you know what's at stake.
Absolutely. How about you, Charles?
Well, when I first started studying for my NISET test, I decided to read the code book like a novel. That was days and days of absolute agony and misery and pain. Since then, I've learned the code is really an interesting document. It's dynamic if you use it in the right way. When we teach class, we bring that dynamic aspect of the code out to the students. Everyone in our industry that's experienced the code thinks it sucks. But when we present that code material in class and we apply it to everyday real life work, it transforms that information into something much more. Ed, what do you think?
Chuck, I think you hit it right on the head because we can actually take a really boring subject and really put it into perspective that our students can actually understand because they've experienced what we're talking about. And to be able to show them why they're doing what they do within the code and those requirements, I think really hits home. It's a home run to them right there. Absolutely. I agree with you, Chuck.
What it's done for me is it's taken the code from just a boring, absolutely painful book to read to something that I'm really, truly excited about talking about and sharing with our students.
Yeah, absolutely. I am guilty, and I will say this. I have had the copy of the code on my nightstand for two reasons. To learn about what's happening and actually to put me to sleep.
There you go. So, guys, what tools do you use to bring the code to life in our classes? How do you bring it to life, Ed?
Well, I tell you, for me, field stories. Field stories are the thing that really touches base with the guys that we talk about. Again, if I may go back, a lot of the guys that are in our class can actually relate to, the terminology that we use. And the situations that we've all been through at one point or another in our career. Understanding that when an inspector finds something unusual and those real world consequences of, let's say, a bad installation, how can you take that situation and actually turn it around to make it interesting and also to be able to identify where it is in the code book and why it's been. I've come to find out over the years of reading the code, and it's gone back many years for me, how the code has changed based upon those real world consequences of bad installations and situations.
Absolutely. Charles, one tool that I've seen you use is humor, where you make jokes or say things that are humorous, or you think are humorous anyway, about the code. How do you use humor to make the code, bring the code to life?
Well, out in the field, we've all experienced various somewhat humorous aspects in our industry, and that's something that everyone can relate to. If they haven't experienced it yet, they're probably going to. In those types of real world incidents really make a big difference. And just throwing something out that pertains to that, as we discuss the code, takes the code from just being generic legal type words on a page to something that they experience every day.
Absolutely. Ed, one that you're particularly good at, and I really admire, and I have not been able to master, is making false statements about the code, where you'll say, this is a code requirement, it's completely false, just to see if the students will challenge you on it. And I've always admired your ability to do that. I have not been able to master that, at least with a straight face.
Well, it's and I appreciate that. It's funny you bring that up. I will see who's asleep in my class, and I'll make those initial false statement about a particular subject matter. Like, example, we all know that the pull station should be mounted at least 10 feet from an egress point. And I'll look around the class and I'll see some people actually talking about that. Like, no, that's not what the code says. Okay, then tell me, where does the code say the requirement for pull station mounted by egress points? And what that does, that starts a ball rolling. Based upon that first initial false statement, you can get their minds working on, hey, let's find this in the code and find out what the real requirement is, rather than just putting a box up, slapping it in, throwing some wire in it, and yeah, it looks good, I can see it.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Charles, I know one of the things that you've always told me that you admired about Ed was his ability to invade people's personal space. And y'all may not be able to detect this from Ed, even though he is in Morgantown, West Virginia. He is from New York originally, from Brooklyn. He's a Brooklyn boy.
I am.
And he is used to getting into people's space and invading personal space. And Charles, tell me about how you admire Ed's ability to get in people's face.
Well, this is a really important thing, I believe. In our classes and the industry professionals that we deal with, we experience a lot of reluctance to start digging in the code. People just don't want to do it. If they absolutely have to, sometimes they will, but they have some reluctance there. Ed, is it acceptable to you to have students not using their books in class?
Well, on that first point, it's not acceptable. Does it happen? Absolutely, it does.
Well, it
But
starts to happen, but
starts
every time you jump right in and encourage them to dive into the code, and they do.
normally, as Brian would say, I like to invade people's spaces. The
I
best way
prefer to use the phrase encourage them to use the codes.
You stick with yours, I'm going with mine. Mine is actually getting right next to someone, looking at them, even though I'm addressing the rest of the class, making eye contact with them and asking them a particular question. And that question may be, again, a false statement, and I
Yep.
want to see how they react.
Yep.
But the best way, I think, to encourage people that are getting into this industry, or even have been in this industry for years, which we've had both in our classes, have we not?
Absolutely.
So the way to encourage, I believe, is to actually be part of that group that's actually learning. So if you're part of that group and you're in the middle of them, it actually feels like you're working as a team to get a solution,
Yep.
if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does.
Well, at what point in your career, Ed, did you start to investigate the code seriously? Was it from day one, or had you worked in the field for a number of years before you actually started diving into the code?
That's a great question. And I think our history, based upon as long as we've known each other, really, I have not uh, been very interested initially to get involved with the code. Been in the industry going close to 40 years now. And basically, I just did what looked right and crossed my fingers when the authority having jurisdiction came in and said, is it okay? Is it going to work? And then, of course, made changes. But when I first started my initial idea of getting NICET certified, because it became a requirement in the state that I work in. We got involved, and I'm going to say we, you and I, got involved with the code and started instructing at that point. And what's a better way to learn about the code and learn the code than to be able to teach someone how to use it?
Absolutely.
Back then, as we started doing that, Ed, it was terrifying to me because when I'd read the code and learn what the code actually said, and I reflected back on jobs that I'd actually worked on and realized the mistakes that I had made and the things that may not have been code compliant, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, so some of those things that you may have done back then are things that could keep you up at night.
Absolutely.
And
When
you wonder,
when would you recommend that people in our industry start researching and learning the code?
as soon as they get into the industry.
Yeah, day one for
And I
sure.
believe the key to success is training. In order to learn, you need to be trained. You can follow along or ghost someone for a couple of years, and you don't know if that person out in the field that you're ghosting with or working with is actually doing it right. But thing about it is, if you start learning and get involved with nicer certification classes that NTC offers, I think that's the best way to really start learning and understanding the meaning of why we're doing what we do.
And at what point in your career does learning stop?
Never
Yeah,
at
it
all.
doesn't.
It doesn't whatsoever because you learn, and sometimes of course, we're all human. We make mistakes, and some of the mistakes that you make can come back and I want to say bite you in the keister, so to speak. Uh, Going forward, uh, you'll never stop learning. If you stop learning, I think it's time to reevaluate what you're doing.
For sure.
Speaking of learning, guys, there is a very important part of NFPA 72 that, Charles, and this goes back to sitting down and reading the code like a novel, which is something we don't encourage doing, but there is a part of NFPA 72 that we do encourage this in, and that would be Chapter 3, which is definitions. Charles, how important is Chapter 3 of NFPA 72 in terms of
Absolutely
understanding fire
essential.
alarm?
It's essential not just for NISA testing or certification testing, it's essential for everyday work as well. The language of the code is the language of our industry, or it should be. When we talk to each other as industry professionals, it's a common language that we share. Knowing that language starts with understanding the definitions in Chapter 3.
And I know you had some personal experience with using Chapter 3 and asking people to look up the term pull station in Chapter 3, or in NFPA 72, I should say. And
Yeah.
how did that work out for you?
Well, I think something like this is I want to say a perfect teaching moment in our class. I would ask the class as a group, open NFPA 72 and try to find the word pull station. It has to be in there, folks. Just I want you to find it in Chapter 3, definitions, which describe the type of device and the usage of the device. The word pull station. We'll have guys go into the book and actually look. We'll have some people say in the class, normally in some of the classes that, well, that word's not in. It's not what we use. I say, I use that word every day. I say, go to my truck and get the pull stations. Let's install them. But based upon that, they can't find the word pull station in the code. Do you guys understand why?
It's not in the heart of the code.
Charles?
Yeah, for sure. We don't, the code doesn't call it a pull station. It
Wait a
has a
minute.
different term.
But we use the word pull station, fellas. Why isn't it in the code?
It's just not a technical term. It's slang.
Bingo. And that's exactly what I use in my class for that perfect teaching moment. I tell them, you know what? We have a lot of words that we toss around this industry that are accepted words in the code and words that we hear every day. Pull station, horn strobe, notification appliances, etc. But is the word pull station in the code? I have one particular moment, in my class, I said, look, I'll give someone $100, $100. And I pulled $100 out of my wallet. I said, this is yours. if you could find the word pull station in the code. How do you think that turned out?
Now I know why that $100 appeared on your expense report.
Don't ask a question unless you're absolutely sure what the answer is.
Yes.
Well, I knew where the answer was found, and the answer is found actually in a particular portion of the code that actually it talks about protective covers in that area. Actually, it's in Annex A, A17.17.9. And it actually said protective covers, also called pull station protectors. And Whitney knows someone in my class has been studying the code and actually went to that reference point. And yes, I did put it on the expense report, fellas.
Well, great. Finally, guys, I'd like to talk about, and I'm going to turn this over to Charles to introduce this discussion. I like to call this one Charles's Daycare Dilemma. Charles, tell us about your Daycare Dilemma.
My two grandchildren go to a Montessori school that's in a church. So one room in the church is used for the Montessori school. They're adding on to it, and the question came up, what are the fire alarm requirements for a daycare of that nature? In this state, the IBC is used and NFPA 72 is used. And the IBC is confusing on this particular subject.
Indeed.
Ed, you've dealt with daycares in your professional career. What typically do you see?
Well, normally in this state, NFPA 101 is used based upon the occupancy requirement for daycare. And people don't understand that when you have a daycare within a building, what has to happen within the rest of the building? I have to toss that out to the rest of you guys. Do we have to meet the same compliance in the rest of the building as the daycare? It all depends on the construction also within the building.
Yep.
Okay. So my experience has been a lot of daycares. As a matter of fact, if I may bring a story up just from this past week, I was into the upper part of Pennsylvania, actually doing a fire alarm design on a building that is a daycare. It's a 3-story daycare.
Wow.
First, a basement level below grade, first level, and then above second level, excuse me, is a play area, gym area. When I walked into the facility, I was wondering, why am I not seeing anything as far as life safety? No fire extinguishers. I didn't see a pull station, those smoke detectors, and the requirements for that are very, very specific in the code what the requirements are for a daycare center. And I do not know, and I asked this question, when was the certificate of occupancy issued for this place to the person I was speaking with? And they couldn't answer that. Because do you think the authority having jurisdiction, in my mind, would they allow this place to open up without any type of fire alarm system? No sprinkler system. So consequently, I was called in to do a design on the building and to draw a set of prints up for them.
And Charles and I were discussing about whether his instance, because it is part of a church, whether it's classified as an I-4 or as a Group E in the IBC, since he's in an IBC area. And the IBC talks about in the definitions chapter in chapter 3 about the difference. And this is one of those ones that we could see going either way, that it could be theoretically classified as a Group E, which would have a different requirement than if it was an I-4. And my ultimate response to Charles was about this, well, this is something that the architect's going to have to make a decision on, or the AHJ. Now, I'm not an architect. I'm actually a city planner. So, I joined the Van Buren boys, and they told me you don't have to be an architect. I could think bigger and be a city planner. And I was hoping you would catch that joke.
I did. I have the handshake also, if you want to go with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, show me the handshake.
Right. Little Seinfeld reference. Very
Little
good.
Seinfeld
Very
reference,
good.
yes. So my experience as a city planner was not helpful in that instance. But that is something that the AHJ or the architect, and the discussion became too about what does the certificate of occupancy say, because this is a retrofit. And if, as Ed said in his building, maybe an existing building, maybe this building's been there for a long time, this is one of those ones that a higher authority probably is going to have to be involved in the decision or give us guidance on it. Also, we looked at IBC Section 508 about mixed use occupancies, and evidently this changed a couple of editions ago. That now there's a requirement for a 3-hour barrier. There used to be a requirement for a 2-hour barrier a couple code cycles back. Now it's a 3-hour barrier, and the requirements are more convoluted than they used to be as well. So this is definitely one that my advice or my not advice, my discussion with Charles was they probably ought to consult the AHJ and consult an architect about exactly what that classification is or is going to be.
And Brian also brought up a point. There's a reference to A3,
Mm-hmm.
group A3 in there as well, depending on the requirements or structure of the building. It gets really convoluted in daycare situations from an IBC perspective.
A3 has a
Absolutely.
long list of types of occupancies. I'm getting ready to design a fire alarm system for a Planet Fitness, and it's an A3 based upon the type of occupancy and uses of the building.
Wow.
But also a lot of other things can fall into that place. It by knowing and understanding how the code works, as we want to get back to that original concept, it's very important when you make that decision how it's classified. And Brian, if I could touch on what you said, it
Please.
really begins and ends with the AHJ also. What those requirements, and he would have to come in and take a look. You know, Charles, was there a fire alarm system in this building that you went to with the
There
daycare, the
is. It's a
Montessori?
church,
Hmm.
so it meets the requirements of a group A occupancy. Uh,
Yes. Was there voice evac in the building?
no,
Okay, so it
no
didn't meet
voice
the
evac.
occupancy level that it didn't require that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, very interesting, guys, because uh, people could make a determination based upon what they feel is their determination and how the code is saying how it should be. But really, when you go to present that to the AHJ, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Absolutely. For example, that 3-story daycare you were talking about, obviously you did not make the decision as to whether or not that building required a fire alarm. That was made for you by the AHJ or by the code official who said, yeah, a fire alarm is required. And it's important that we remember that from the fire alarm perspective, that there are forces in play, so to speak, such as the AHJ, such as the architect, that will make that determination of classification. And then we design based on that classification. And Planet Fitness being an A3 is very interesting to me because I would think that would be maybe a business, uh, or certainly not a daycare, not an I4 or an E, but it could be a business classification.
I
So
thought so
there's
too.
yeah, and there's all kinds of interesting internations in this. And one thing we got to remember is we are not code officials; we're fire alarm people, and we have to look at what is given to us and go from there. We can certainly have a discussion, but we don't make the decision.
It's
Well,
an amazing thing how the Planet Fitness, if I may say, the occupancy is going to be 1,012 in that. Yeah.
well, I think it's a good point that the codes can't cover every single thing. Having an authority outside of the codes to make certain determinations is important.
You know, and even if you
Absolutely.
design a fire alarm system, you bring the code official, let's use the daycare again, you design it based upon what you know about the code. For example, I had a .7 issue with smoke detectors at one time in a daycare, and the authority came in, not the authority that approved my prints, but another authority that came in and did a final inspection, and I was wrong based upon his determination. So it's very important that all the players meet and understand what's happening with the project
Well, you've been married for a number of years, Ed, so you're used to being wrong, right? Correct?
every day for the
Every
last
day.
43 years. I've come to accept it.
Yes, yes, exactly. Well, guys, I want to thank you again for the lively discussion. And Ed, thanks again for taking the time with us. Good luck with your inspection and testing today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all again for joining us. And I hope everybody tunes in for the next edition of Temporal 3.